Christian,
Yeah.
you met Fassbinder in 1969.
Yes.
You remained friends until he died. In 1974, you shot this interview with him in Cannes, which is now the centerpiece of your film.
Yeah.
Here's a question that I have for you. How come that you waited for 30 years before you made this film?
That's complicated. I was scared by this interview. I dared not watch it because I experienced for the first time, I don't think it was 74, I think it must have been 76 or something. I experienced for the first time that Fassbinder took cocaine. When we changed the film in our camera, he went to the toilet, and I could feel when he came back that he had taken cocaine. I had heard that he had started that, but I'd never experienced it. And it scared me. Not that he was any different. Most other people, when they take cocaine, they are, excited and everything. Fassbinder was calm, but still there was something that made me unsure. So I never saw the film. Then, 30 years after or something, a very good friend in Munich, Robert Fischer, I have apparently told him that I had this film which I shot during when Despair was shown at Cannes. And Robert was making extra material for the DVD version of Despair, and he wanted to see this interview. And I said, "Good luck, my dear, here you have it." And then Robert said, "You must immediately see it, Christian, because it's fantastic." Then I saw it. And then I decided to make the film. I had wanted to make the film ever since he died, but I didn't feel I had, or I didn't know how to make it, but now I knew.
So at the time when you shot that interview, you were basically just recording a conversation between two friends.
Yes, yes. Where he became more and more mysterious because he had been on the toilet, And I remember especially one thing he said, which even today is a mystery for me. He talks about madness, because Despair is a film about madness. And he has some weird ideas that you can survive during your madness, which I don't understand. For me, people get lost in madness. They are not being helped by madness. Fassbinder thought at least then he thought madness could be a cure from society. And he dedicated the film to three famous mad artists, Antonin Artaud, Vincent van Gogh, and Unica Thürn. Artaud and Van Gogh, of course, are world famous. Unica Thürn was, at least then, only known in Germany. I didn't know her either. I know her today, but she was a mad artist. She was schizophrenic and wrote books about schizophrenia.
Yeah, I know. I had to Google her.
Really?
When I first saw those three names, she was the one that I Googled. But to go back to you and Fassbinder, it is very clear, not only from that interview, but from your film in general, that the two of you shared a certain very genuine, deep friendship and affection and intimacy. And Fassbinder was one of those rare artists for whom cinema was not a profession, not a hobby, but simply a way of living and breathing.
Yes.
So here's a question that I have that really interests me. What, in your opinion, was the primary driving force behind this way of life?
it's impossible to answer. I asked Fassbinder several times, why do you need to make so many films? And Fassbinder, well, if he could answer, at least he did not answer. He said he was a very good Freudian. He adored Sigmund Freud, and he said, well, I suppose it must have something to do with my childhood. But if he knew what, he never said it. I once asked him more specific why his mother always had roles in his films. And then he said, well, it's a way for me to communicate with my mother in a way that I usually cannot do. And I think this answer has a deep secret. I think it was his way of communicating with people, to have them play in his films. Because not only actors were playing in his films, from the beginning it was friends that played in the films. I think they were together about something. And this feeling of being together, I think, was so important for him. When he did not make films or theater, they had nothing to gather around. They had no reason to be together. Now they had a strong reason, and that is the film. I think this touches a secret which he would not explain himself.
No, but it does make a lot of sense, I think.
Yeah.
Speaking of his mother and family, in your film you reveal a lot of your own intimacy, but also a lot of his intimacy. We learn a lot that we did not know before. You told me that you and Fassbinder often discussed films. You told me that you were always very sincere with him, that if you didn't like something, you told him that. What do you think he would say about your film?
I don't know. I think that would depend on his mood on that day. I remember, I'll give you an example of this. He once showed me a new film he had just made called Satans Braten. That was the first of his films I did not like. Since then I've seen it maybe 5 or 6 times because I could be wrong. Of course I could be wrong. But still, after the 6th screening, I don't like the film. And when we left the cinema, I said to him, well, you only showed disgust for people in this film, which was something he never showed people. He loved people, even the most unsympathetic characters. He loved them, he understood them, he defended them in their weaknesses. But in Satans Braten, I didn't see that. He didn't respond at all. If that was my opinion, well, okay. If he showed disgust, it was my opinion, not his. And then we talked about other things. Then a year later, I showed him one of my films about my peasant family, to whom I have a very mixed relationship. One reason why I showed it to him is that his star, Irm Hermann, is starring in the film. So of course he had to see it. When we left the cinema, he said, you only show disgust for the characters in this film. That was his revenge. After 1 year, I got it back. And I said, I don't show disgust. I love the characters. Although I criticize them, I love them. No, you hate them. You have only disgust for them. That was the end of that discussion.
Do you think, another speculation or a speculative question, do you think that if he would be still alive today, he wouldn't be that old, would he still make films, do you think? And what kind of films would he make?
He would definitely still make films, but he would not make as many. In the last year or something of his life, he said, well, I have to slow down. From now on, I'll make only one film for cinemas and one for television each year. That'll be it. But I'm afraid he died before he realized that dream of only 2 films a year. And I'm afraid Harry Bear, an actor and production leader who was very close to Rainer, Harry Bear once said, well, I'm afraid he died from an overdoses of work, which is true.
Yeah. I have one last question. Why do you think it's still important that we show Fassbinder films and watch Fassbinder films? What do you think that makes them relevant for today?
Well, I would say there are at least 2 reasons. One reason, which I only discovered after his death, is that if you want to know Germany's history in the last century, it is all in his films. He starts with the fall of the Weimar Republic up during the 20s with Berlin Alexanderplatz and Bollwieser. He shows the uprising of Nazism in Germany. He only made one film on the Second World War, Lili Marleen, which I don't like very much. And then he shows what the Germans called the Wirtschaftswunder, the financial miracle in the 50s, which to him was not a miracle at all. And then he shows the uprising of the youth rebellion in the 60s. He shows the Women's Liberation Front, and he sort of ends up with the Baader-Meinhof terrorism. From the Weimar Republic to modern terrorism, he was there. He covered West Germany's situation. That's one reason. Another reason, which is just as important, is that he sort of restored the film language. The film language was so corrupt in the late 60s, I think. He started from scratch, inventing film language again, inventing it in his very special style, but invented it. I would say there are many people who says, well, he had his own style, yes, but he never got any pupils. So what's the importance of his films? Well, the importance is, I think, exactly there. It's important for Fassbinder not to have pupils, because he shows us you have to invent your own style. Or as the French Nouvelle Vague director said 10 years before, they say you should write your films with handwriting as intimate as a poet writes poems or a painter paints with his hands. In contrast to the film industry, you should write with your handwriting. And Fassbinder did that.
Okay. Thank you very much for this conversation.